Nick had called her back later that night with a time and place to meet his hush-hush friend. A wild act of determination had led her to make the call, but as she walked through the muggy night air, Krista wondered if she'd acted irresponsibly. She listened blindly, followed the precise instructions of a man she met less than a month ago, and agreed to meet his nameless friend at 2 o'clock in the morning in a back alley. Krista crossed her arms over her chest and leaned against the brick. She let out a slow breath as she stared down the empty alley. The smell of garbage overwhelmed any fresh, breathable air. Either a restaurant worked out of one of these buildings, or someone had disposed a body in one of the 3 dumpsters. She wasn't curious enough to check. Krista stuck her hands in the front pockets of her black jacket. She felt like an idiot, the poor soul in a low-budget horror movie who was always the first to be killed. She sighed in an attempt to clear her thoughts. Thinking about things like that would get her nowhere. Instead, she tried to concentrate on her current situation. Was she crazy to believe Nick's friend could help her? Was she so desperate for help she'd risk her life to come out here? Krista already knew that answer. She was, or she wouldn't be here. Why couldn't she meet his friend at the bar? Or even in the alley behind Nick's? Why did Nick send her to a place like this? What kind of place was this to meet someone? Or the more pressing question, what kind of person was she going to meet in a place like this? Are you Krista? The sudden intrusion broke into her thoughts with such force, she jumped against the building behind her. She whipped around, squinted into the darkness, and saw nothing. A masculine voice had materialized out of the shadows and simply dissipated with the passing breeze. The Cheshire Cat from Alice in Wonderland came to mind. Is that a yes? She continued to stare, her lungs tight as she forced them to take in each new breath. Who are you? Krista's voice quavered as she fought to control her fear. She wasn't comfortable meeting people alone in the middle of the night, and the fact that this stranger remained hidden didn't help calm her nerves. Where are you? Are you all right with me calling you Krista, or would you prefer Mrs. Adams? He was very polite for a disembodied voice. Krista didn't care what he called her, as long as he showed himself. She stared into the shadows and willed a form to take shape. She couldn't see well enough to pinpoint the voice. The longer she stared, the faster her heart beat. Beads of sweat covered her forehead, despite the chill in the air. Krista understood why he chose to meet at this spot. It was by his design. This man could be anywhere. I don't care what you call me as long as you tell me where you are, she reasoned. Fair enough. He'd moved. Now his voice came to her from an area closer to the road. She twisted around. I'm closer to your left. This was a game to him. Krista's eyes darted from shadow to shadow. I can't see you. You didn't ask me to show myself. You wanted to know where I was. She heard the smile in his voice. Krista had enough. She refused to stand out in the dark and let this man make a fool of her. She headed to the corner of West 65th. This is crazy, she mumbled, more to herself. This man might be a lunatic. He already hid in the shadows of darkened alleys like some serial killer. What in the hell had Nick thought when he sent her to a place like this? You must be very brave coming out here by yourself. His tone remained polite and conversational, like 2 people in a diner who happened to share a laugh as they both reached for the same packet of sugar. Brave? That was the first time in her life anyone used that word to describe her. No, not really. Desperate was more accurate. Are you Nick's friend? A slight pause. Yes. Krista spun on her heels and gasped. A man stood behind her, so close his breath disturbed loose strands of her hair. Krista stepped back. He stood almost a head taller. His eyes were dark but friendly and invited her in, the same way Nick's had. Under the moonlight, his skin took on a pale, sickly glow. Dressed in a pair of blue jeans and a black t-shirt, he wore a loose black hooded jacket. Clearly, this man often spent his nights in the streets. He acted completely comfortable within the shadows. Relax. You don't have to be scared. If I were here to hurt you, you'd already be dead. Was that supposed to make her feel better? Or was that his signature icebreaker line, telling her that he could kill her, he just didn't yet? Krista stepped backward. The more distance she kept between her and him, the better she felt. She didn't look away. If she did, He might fade into the darkness, and only an act of Congress would get him to show himself a second time. Nick said you had some domestic problems. He took a step closer and stopped short when she took another step back. That's right, she confirmed. Her next step backed her into a dumpster. The thought of touching the garbage-crusted metal made her cringe. She sidestepped. I suppose that'd be one way to put it. What kind of help do you need? Krista didn't know how much this man already knew about her situation. Do you have a name? Everyone does. She waited. Ugh, he was impossible. Are you going to share it? We'll wait on that. Why? I'll give you my name if I decide to help you. It's my husband. He murdered my father, and I don't feel like the detective in charge is working hard enough to find him. Who's in charge of the case? Krista frowned. Detective Weiss. He's a decent cop. You think I should leave it to him? I didn't say that. His gaze shifted slightly. Is that it? You just want to find him? Yes. Can you do that? That made him smile. What are you going to do with him after I find him? That was an odd question. Send him to prison. I see. Find him, catch him, and send him to prison. Yes, but he can't find out. I need the search to remain a secret. That won't be a problem. Krista took a slow breath. A silence fell over them. His expression gave nothing away. Like a statue, he stared at her with dead, emotionless eyes. Then finally he spoke. All right, what's his name? Krista felt relieved. This might not be so bad. Christian Adams. Adams? He held her stare for a moment. Is he any relation to Cecil Adams? Krista shook her head. I don't know. Who's Cecil Adams? Never mind. He waved his hand in a dismissive gesture. Do you believe your husband is still in the city? Krista shook her head, slightly curious at his sudden change in subject. I don't know, she answered with a shrug. Will you only find him if he's in town? No, but it will determine the price of the hunt. Price? Since you're a friend of Nick's, I've agreed to give you a discount. 10,000. Krista arched her brow. 10,000? It was far higher than she expected. Then again, she hadn't known what to expect. Without her own source of income, she couldn't come up with a fee of $500. His stony stare softened. I don't work for free. Krista dropped her gaze to the ground. I was afraid you were going to say that. She shook her head and raised her eyes to meet his. I'm sorry. I believe I've wasted your time. Nick didn't tell me your help came at such a price. I don't have that kind of money. I see. He hooked his thumbs in his pockets. What would you be able to pay? Krista shook her head again. Okay, then I suppose our visit is concluded. Good luck with the hunt, Krista. Krista smacked her lips. Thanks. She watched him carefully as he stepped back and disappeared into the shadows. With a sigh, she turned and walked across the street. As she stepped back onto the curb, Krista flagged down a taxi. One pulled to the corner before she lowered her hand. She slid into the back seat and glanced out the window. What a waste of time, she thought dryly. How could she ever assume she could afford to hire someone on her own? No, she had to find a better way. Somehow, Krista had to find her husband and make him pay for the pain he had caused her.